From one point of view, you can see that there can be good intentions behind having targets for adoption. It came from the view that there were large numbers of people in the care, large numbers of children and young people in the care system. They were languishing there, they were badly treated, they were often abused, they bullied one another, they came out, as I said, poorly educated, very depressed, very damaged people at the end of it, many of those children. And yet there are families who are willing to adopt children, and so it seemed to make sense, put the two together, get some of those children out of the care system and into good homes, people who could look after them properly. But it didn't work that way. Like so many good intentions, what happened was that the children who were taken for adoption were not the children who were languishing in the care system. They were young babies who had not been in care at all, because there's a mismatch. What seemed to be an obvious natural fit actually was a mismatch, that the people who wanted to adopt didn't want to adopt my 13-year-old car thieves. They wanted babies. They wanted beautiful, pretty, perfect, in every way, babies. And they didn't want the children from the care system for adoption. And so it failed. So in order to meet the pressure that was being put on local authorities, and in order to get the extra money that was being given if you adopted more children, the wrong children were taken, babies were taken who really did have good homes and should never have been taken, and were put up for hostile adoption. With very serious consequences. It's not been a good situation. Functions that the public should have the right to find out some of what's occurring. So I'm of the school of thought that says we do need to get them opened up. Yes, we do need to provide some restrictions on reporting in terms of not reporting the identities of the children. So there needs to be sufficient protection of the children, which is what the relevant legislation says, that it's supposed to be about protecting the children. But beyond that, I really don't see that we should be protecting malpractice from public scrutiny. Now that's deeply wrong, and that's got to stop. There's no jury, there's a judge or a magistrate, usually. That's the case. Now once things go to appeal, things become different, because the public are allowed to sit in on appeals as a normal right. So if people can sit in on appeals without the sky falling down, why can't they sit in on the original cases? It's a bit of a nonsense that the public shouldn't be allowed to sit in on normal children's and young people's cases, so long as we protect the children. I don't think we should be protecting people who lie, people who mislead the courts, or people whose decision making is faulty, or whose arguments are flawed. We shouldn't be concealing that. And the only way we can reveal that is properly, fully, is if the public are allowed to walk into the courts, and as long as they don't go and reveal the identity of the children in public, then we can expose what's happening, and we can hold the courts to a proper standard. And it's no good. Some of the judges have said, well, what about if we just release the judgments? But that's still not satisfactory, because it's still then the truth filtered through the perception of an individual judge, and people are still not in a position to assess, well, was that a wise judgment or not? Does that judgment properly reflect the evidence that was put before this judge? And the public need to be able to assess that. And we need to be proud of our public officials. We need to have a set of public officials about whom we can say, yeah, we are ruled by wise people. This was a really good judgment. And you do see that sometimes, and you feel proud of those judges. And if the public can see all the judgments, then all judges will be held to a proper standard, but so will all the witnesses, and especially the experts. I mean, that's the area of one of the biggest areas of concern, isn't it? The so-called expert evidence. A lot of the nonsense and the malpractice that's gone on should have been stopped years ago, but one of the most effective ways to stop it is to make the courts open to the general public. The other way is we need to reorganise child protection so that we have a proper national dedicated child protection service, and they don't do anything else. They don't get bought, they don't get influenced, they don't get played by crony networks or nepotism or any other form of corruption. They are responsible purely and solely for child protection. That's all they do. And get a proper professional service, properly trained, make sure they don't serve vested interests and they don't have conflicts of interest. They're just responsible to the children and nobody else. And I think if you do those two things, you've gone an enormous way to cleaning up what's a really bad mess at the moment, and has been for a while. It's a big area. I really enjoy getting my teeth into it because it's an area that you can look at and you can see very clearly where it's going wrong, and there's some pretty easy ways to fix it. And there seems to be a commitment in Britain, I think, to finally sorting the child protection system out. I think all political parties have got some commitment. That doesn't mean everybody in every political party is committed to it, but I think there is a commitment to getting it cleaned up. It seriously had gone too far, and I think Sally Clark frightened a lot of people because here was a woman, she was not only a lawyer, but she worked for one of the best, most respected law firms in Britain, and yet it could happen to her. I mean, we all know or knew that the poor get mistreated in the criminal justice system, but he was a very powerful woman. And then there was a husband who also worked for a very powerful law firm, and they went after him too. Yeah. And then there was the case of Angela Cannings, and there was virtually no evidence against Angela Cannings at all. There was nothing but spin. There was nothing but, you know, a particular kind of way of looking askance at something, a particular kind of storytelling. And I think people started to realise then that if it could happen to them, it could happen to anybody. And when I started to realise that the children of PhD students were being stolen, that's when I really started to think, well, you know, what's going on here? This is the children of some of the best and the finest minds in the country who are being taken and forcibly adopted. Now, something's very wrong here, and as I looked into it deeply, I found with a lot of other people something deeply wrong, very, very wrong in the child protection system. And